There is a tour going in September. Now, it ties in with some major musical festivals in Europe, so we're leaving in September, arriving in Bonn. Of course, that's where Beethoven was born. We'll be going to Beethoven House, and it's one of the best museums for Beethoven. And it will be at the very time of the Beethoven Festival. And the city of Bonn itself, as a university town, is a fascinating place. Has lots of green spaces, and not only will you be walking in the very footsteps of Ludwig van Beethoven, wonderful vistas open up as you walk around the Rhine River area, as well as inside the town itself. The wonderful Rathaus, the town hall, it's situated at the top of the square where the traditional marketplace is, and weddings take place there and people throng through the market area. It's such a wonderful, relaxing time for so many of the people who are wandering through the very centre and so close to where Beethoven was born and where many other things happened as well. You'll be strolling with a guide who will show you exactly the Beethoven connections, but apart from that, there's the wonderful squares. You'll see people relaxing in those tree-studded big squares and looking across to wonderful sights such as one of the landmarks of Bonn is the Minster or Monastery Church, which is a magnificent building within itself, but it has a Beethoven connection. You can see people, local people as well as tourists passing through, and they're sitting out enjoying the wonderful atmosphere. We'll be staying at the Hotel Bristol here. It's another quiet area, but apart from that it's green again, with long tree-studded avenues and wonderful green areas and a very quiet atmosphere to enjoy the wonders of Bonn, and yet it's only a 5-minute walk to this wonder. Yes, it's the Monastery Church again. And this is fascinating too, because it was the original public Latin school in Beethoven's day, and that's where he studied grammar, rhetoric and logic, all held in the chapter house at the side of the Minster Church here. Just about at every corner there's some kind of Beethoven connection. Strolling through the streets, little narrow streets with the old houses, it's just so colourful, and it's a wonderful place to look into shops as well. There's a blend of the old and the new. There are modern shops there, but they've retained the spirit of Bonn in the old town area. In the centrum there, you'll find places that just relax you as you stroll through and admire the architecture or go in and do some shopping. There are places like the Old Catholic Church, fascinating to look inside. And just around the corner is this church. And this is the parish church where the 10-year-old Ludwig began to play the organ at the 6 o'clock morning service. And like his grandfather, he also played with the court orchestra. Again, there are green spaces everywhere to be found as you stroll through the very pleasant and calming atmosphere of the city of Bonn. And just outside the old town is the Alter Friedhof, or the old cemetery. Ludwig's mother died in 1787. And there's a Schumann connection as well, as you may well know. In Bonn, that is where he died. And so the composer trails start opening up. And this is where you're really going to find out more about Robert and Clara Schumann. It's the clinic where he'd been admitted for a nervous disorder and where he finally died. We move on, and if I can just get Google involved here, here's a Google map. We go from Bonn through to Eisenach, and Eisenach, apart from having the castle which inspired many of the scenes in Tannhäuser, Wagner's masterpiece, there's also the place where Bach was born. He was born in Eisenach, but to trace his life in the town, we will be going to Bach House, not his actual birthplace, which no longer exists, but the first Bach museum in the world to be established to mark his many achievements. Not far from here is Luther House, where religious reformer Martin Luther lived during part of his school days in Eisenach in 1498. This very pretty and compact old town has some wonderful architecture and wide open spaces such as the historic Market Square. Bordering one side of the Market Square is the Church of St. George, where Johann Sebastian Bach was baptized on the 23rd of March 1685. We'll be staying just behind the Luther statue at the Hotel Thüringer Hof near the Nikolai Church and Town Gate. We'll also be moving on then, another Google map, thank you very much Mr. Google, moving on to Leipzig. On the way, our lunch break will be at Liszt House in Weimar, where Franz Liszt spent the final summers of his life. Alongside the Liszt Museum are Weimar's Botanical Gardens, partly designed by the famous German writer and poet Goethe. There are many musical trails in Leipzig. Richard Wagner was born there. There's Robert and Clara Schumann lived there, and Mendelssohn. Now Felix Mendelssohn has a festival devoted to him at that time of year in Leipzig. Plus we'll be visiting Mendelssohn House. Now that is a beautiful museum. It's the apartment where he lived in Leipzig. While we're in Leipzig, we're close enough now to go back into the Baroque again. We'll go to visit the Handel Museum, and that's at Halle, just a short drive from Leipzig. So we'll take you out there. And the musical instruments in that museum are really spectacular. So that's Leipzig. So after Leipzig, another map. From Leipzig, we'll go down to Prague via Dresden. Have lunch in Dresden. Have a look at the Semper Opera.
After the new Royal Theatre was destroyed by fire in 1869, Gottfried Semper was commissioned to design a new opera house to replace his former theatre, where Richard Wagner had given his first performances of works such as The Flying Dutchman. Dresden has many highlights, including this monumental mosaic made of 25,000 Meissen porcelain tiles, the 102-metre Procession of the Dukes, honouring 1,000 years of rule. The painting somehow survived the bombing raids of 1945.
Very interesting place to visit, right on the what they call the balcony of Europe. Will overlook the Elbe River. Very pretty too.
At the southern side of the Semper Opera House is the Swinger, named after the site behind the original fortifications of the town. This 18th century complex with a view of the Saxon King John through the entrance arcade was made into an open-air ballroom for festivals and tournaments. The main entrance, the Crown Gate, is one of the landmarks of Dresden.
And then Prague. We are linking in with as many of the festivals as possible.
town square, the visitor marvels at such sights as the Baroque St Nicholas Church, as the former Hussite Church, Our Lady Before Tin, and the square's centrepiece, the astronomical clock on the face of the old town hall. The clock dates from 1490, when it said the master clockmaker Hannes, who built it, was blinded so that he couldn't repeat his masterpiece. Hourly, the 12 apostles revolved through opened windows above this timeless piece of craftsmanship.
And we're also, for the first time, we're going to take you after Prague to Litomyšl. This is the town where Smetana, Vecek Smetana, was born. So we're going to go to his museum, the place where he was actually born, which is right opposite the castle in that township in the Czech Republic. And so we'll make a stop there, have lunch, and then head on to Vienna.
Welcome to Vienna, the city of dreams. Vienna, or Wien, the capital of Austria, was once the home of the Habsburgs and residence of great composers such as Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Brahms, Schubert, Strauss, and of course many more. Vienna was for many centuries the political and economic centre of the Austrian Empire under the Habsburg family, and between 1867 and 1918, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. Today, the city dominates the economic and cultural life of Austria. Its population is less than 2 million people. The State Opera House, which was burned down in 1945, was rebuilt in 1955. The inner city was once surrounded by protective walls. The walls were raised in 1857, and in their place a broad boulevard, the Ringstrasse, was built and subsequently lined with imposing buildings, monuments and parks. Vienna is a city of numerous museums and art galleries. Among the most prominent are the Albertina, the Museum of the 20th Century, Kunsthistorisches Art Museum, the Natural History Museum, and the Museum of Fine Arts. There's also the Hofburg, the former imperial palace, the oldest part of which was built during the 13th century. Vienna's buildings are of many different architectural styles. Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque and typical Austrian Biedermeier structures are found together with early 20th century barrack-like apartment buildings and modern apartment buildings of the post-World War II period. The Gothic St. Stephen's Cathedral, rebuilt between the 13th and 15th century, is in the centre of the inner city and has a 113-metre steeple that can be seen from all parts of Vienna.
And in Vienna, well, we're back on all the trails again, aren't we? We've got so many trails to follow, including the very moving place, which is called Testament House, where Beethoven wrote his testament, revealing for the first time that he was deaf. And him, of all people, with such a talent. We'll be having our farewell dinner at another Beethoven site where he wrote part of the Ninth Symphony. He wrote it in many parts, of course, in Baden and around Vienna, and also in this place, in the wine district. So that's just a general idea of what we're doing with this tour. And with Mike Smith along, such a genial guy and such a knowledgeable music host, this is going to be a really special tour.